Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 152 of Discourse in Magic with Dan White. Now, if you don't know who Dan is, you got to check him out. He's been on Jimmy Fallon 10 times. He's been an advisor for Blaine, for Copperfield, and he is just an incredible magician. And this episode was especially special. We got to talk all about magic at the Nomad, the business behind making it work, and the magic behind making it sensational. It was such a cool episode. Dan is super cool and super genuine. I think you're really going to like it. Here it is, episode 152 with Dan White. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah Babbins, and we are here with the man. You go to New York now, and you hear about going to the magician at the Nomad. This guy's been on Fallon 10 times. He's basically a rock star. We're here with the one and only Dan White. Dan, how are you?
Good. That's a beautiful introduction. Thank you. I'm blushing over here.
So let's start at the very beginning. How did you get into magic?
Yeah, so, I think very similar to many other magicians in that, my dad got me a magic set when I was a kid and that whole sort of thing. But I grew up in Philadelphia and I had a magic store that was close to me. And after seeing Copperfield and getting that magic set, I was able to go to that magic store and basically, learn things and go there frequently, but at some point I didn't have enough money to buy all the tricks that I wanted. So I told the people who worked there, the owners, that if I could possibly work in exchange for learning magic, and they accepted that, and I started working there, and I probably worked there for about 7 or 8 years, behind the counter doing all the demo stuff and all that. But that kind of was like the real intro in the trenches, sort of where I learned most of the stuff,
Well, it's interesting because you get sort of like an actual course or an actual like trained learning by knowing how to demo every single trick and knowing about every book, that comes into the shop.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, like I always say, I think the best way to learn magic is just by doing it, repeatedly, and that, working in a magic store, I think, forces you to do that because you have to keep demoing these things for people, and you learn, all the ins and outs of those performance aspects of things that you wouldn't really learn from a book necessarily or from a video.
yeah, and again, like the part that's, and I agree with you, like you get to demo probably more than any. How old were you at the time?
I started when I was about 12.
Yeah, so I guess so 8 years or so, so 12 to 20,
Yeah.
like that's a lot of performing time that you get. And we all know that's the name of the game, is just how many hours and how much performing and how much, and also performing with potentially, other magicians over your
Yeah.
shoulders and stuff,
Yeah.
right?
I got
Which
really good at the hot rod. That's the bad part about working in a magic store, though, is that you end up doing the same things over and over again, and there might
yeah,
not be the best things. You know what I mean?
right. You're doing stuff to sells maybe, and
Exactly.
more so than
Which doesn't mean
stuff.
there's anything wrong with the hot rod, by the way, which is a great trick.
It's a great trick. I once
Yeah.
was called a devil for doing that trick.
Yeah.
So let's keep moving forward. So you worked at the magic store, and then before we talk about some of the big magic things around that time, around 20, and obviously I'm just extrapolating the numbers, but around 20, did you go to university? Did you decide like, hey, I'm not going to do that, like I'm going to take magic seriously? Like, what was the transition into magic being your actual gig?
Yeah. So, no, I did go to university full time, while doing magic. It was one of those things where I was, I think a lot of people have I know a lot of people have these questions because a lot of kids come up to me asking these same questions. It's like, should I pursue magic full time, or should I, go to school and see where it leads me? And I went the route of, I'm going to go to school and have that as a backup. And see where that leads me. It wasn't like I was going to school because I felt like I had to. I was actually interested in going to school. There was other
What were you
things that I was
studying?
interested in. I was studying art history and painting. So really not very secure things to do. It was really just out of an interest of, I just was pursuing what I was interested in.
I'm always thinking about the value of university, or college right now, especially if you're a magician. And just like you, obviously, I get a lot of messages from people in that point in their life, and that's why I try to talk about it as much as I can.
No, it's like it's the point in the people's lives where they have the most questions because it's full of uncertainty. You feel like you're at this fork in the road and you have to make these decisions immediately. And that's the thing. If my advice is you don't have to make those decisions immediately. Like take it one step at a time. There's always a chance to change.
Yeah,
To.
totally. And what's cool about what you were just saying is that you got to have a university in art, right? In art history and in art, so it's like that actually does further your knowledge and your ability to create magic and understand magic, like having other culture in your life. So you get an opportunity to explore that for 4 years, and that's incredible in a university setting. Like, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and that's the thing about being a performer. It's like it's good to be well rounded in everything, not just exactly what you do.
So let's continue the journey. So you went to school, you did art, and then around the end of it, what happened where you went the route of magic, or what were at least the first steps that you did after the magic store that helped you start forming a career like this?
Yeah, so the first steps were, I mean, the big one for me was moving to New York. So like I said, I was originally from Philadelphia. That's where I went to school. Moved to New York and started getting some kind of like nighttime gigs, working at bars and nightclubs
And
and
sorry,
things like
just to
that.
pause, did you just pack up your things and say, "I'm going to New York, that's where the magic is"?
It
Like,
was it was that plus there was a schooling thing that I was doing sort of post university. So it was kind of an education thing as well as the magic thing. But the magic thing was a big part of it. I was like, you know what? I just feel like doing these great fun walk around gigs at bars and clubs all over the city for maybe 2 years, 3 years, and in that time meeting all the magicians in New York, which was, a huge thing, being able to, hang out on Saturdays at at Tannins and meet all those guys. And that was really eye opening because you get that real sort of inner world of magic, which is a lot of fun. And from there, got to meet David Blaine, which was a real big thing because after meeting him, I started working for him and doing sort of behind the scenes stuff on a couple of his specials.
so let's talk.
Uh,
Let's pause and talk a little bit about that. So first, tell me about. So you met him, and how did you go from meeting him to working with him? What was it you think that you did that he was like, "Yeah, I want this on my team"?
well, it was we were hanging out with myself and my really good friend for many years, a guy named Robert Smith, B. Smith. And then to back up, which is interesting, in Philadelphia before I moved to New York, myself, this guy named Robert Smith, B. Smith, and a guy named Dan Haas, we sort of every single night we would do magic in B. Smith's apartment and like work on it and jam on really crazy stuff. And especially looking back now, we were really kind of ahead of our time with the stuff that we were creating and performing. It was in that very that kind of time period of like street magic, David Blaine stuff. It
Yeah,
just sort of it was
yeah.
really big at the moment. And Robert lived right on this street called South Street, so it was really great because we would just come up with stuff, walk out of the apartment, go onto the street, and start doing magic for people.
Oh, wow.
Uh, and
Wow.
it
And how long
was,
did you do that for? How many years were you guys doing that?
that was probably a year or two
That's incredible.
solidly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then the same thing, we would go out to bars and nightclubs and do stuff as well. Um, but the street stuff was really great because it wasn't like it was more like the David Blaine style of street magic. We would just walk up to people and do stuff. But the magic was really great, and we used to film it. We had like this really teeny camera that at that time was like the DVR tapes, and we'd come back and then edit them on two VCRs. Um, things have changed quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, just so much experience was gained from that, and really just playing around with so much really cool stuff. And it really is amazing to keep like even now going back to that time, thinking about some of the methods that we were using. They constantly come up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the beauties of magic, which is one of the things that I fell in love with about math, but really about magic, which is just like one of the beauties is that any time in magic when you have to come up with a new solution, you get to draw from all the knowledge that you've ever had ever,
Mm.
in all of magic, like all the books you've ever read, all the videos you've ever watched, everything you've ever seen. Like that's your arsenal to come up with something new. So it seems like you had so many different trainings that allowed you to be able to create. So let's talk about the David Blaine thing. So what happened? You did some magic, or so he started hanging out with.
Myself and Robert Smith, we would go over there and hang out, and eventually, I mean, I think we asked him. We said, "Hey, could we work for you?" And he said, "Sure." And yeah,
I
there you
mean,
go.
it's funny. I'm imagining that when you were going there to hang out, you were probably showing him some of the stuff that you guys had been jamming on.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And there was one thing in particular that Robert did, I think that really was really cool. And at that time, where he was doing stuff with stigmata, like the actual like blood appearing on his hands, and we were doing like really weird stuff like that. And that I think those were the things that kind of really impressed David.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I wanted to highlight there, the reason I asked that part at the end is because, you made it sound like all you did was ask, and he was like, "Oh, great," but it also comes down to him being impressed and you guys putting in the work in the first place, so that when an opportunity like that presents itself.
Yeah, and it's funny that you brought in sort of the art aspect, which I mentioned before, because I had also done like a drawing for David that he really liked, and it's you're right. It's like it wasn't just asking, but it was like sort of like these little qualities that now I don't even think about, But yeah, there's definitely some things that we presented with him, and I think we all jammed well together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And also, obviously, the asking, which plays a huge role. Oftentimes, we're too afraid to ask, if we can be involved in something, and then, it passes right by us. So you started working with David, and you said you were helping him on, in the back end or producing and stuff. What did that mean exactly?
Well, at the beginning, it was just sort of helping him come up with tricks or just like practicing things and showing him stuff. And it wasn't really sort of delineated. There was no real title. Eventually, it became more of a titled thing. When the show started actually going into production, that's when it was more like, okay, at the beginning, I was just sort of doing, sort of more menial stuff, like putting together gimmicks and kind of more menial stuff, and then eventually, being more of the magic consultant and the magic producer.
And what did that mean as a producer? Consultant, I sort of know what the vibe is, but I don't really know what a magic producer is.
Yeah, I think a magic producer, and I guess there is no real like standard magical producer title because there's not that many of them, is basically working with the consultants and then putting together the things to actually manufacture them into a real thing that can be performed. Because consultants, we throw out a lot of ideas and things like that, but actually having somebody to sort of put them all together, funnel them all through, see how each idea fits in the larger picture of a whole show, making sure the props are there and together, and making sure basically it happens is taking the idea from just an idea to actual reality.
Well, that's incredible, and it, we'll loop around and talk about this a little bit shortly, but I know that now you work with a team, and I'm sure that ability, came in handy or comes in handy quite a bit now, being able to, cipher through a whole bunch of, different ideas from creative people and be able to, put maybe the best one forward. So again, I just keep thinking about the different trainings that you are able to have, which are really
Yeah, I
incredible.
mean I've never worked in TV before that moment, so it was definitely a great training for sure.
Yeah. So let's continue. So you worked for Blaine for a few years, and then what were the next few steps in your journey?
After that, I did some more just gigs on my own and various things. And there was some space in between where, because David wasn't doing a show, so then he started doing another show, so I started working with him again. And then after that, I had started working for David Copperfield for a bit, but there was actually there was a big gap in the middle between those two where I sort of left New York, went out to LA and Florida for a little bit, and with my now wife, and worked on a project with a guy named BJ Bueno in Florida. And we sort of put together an idea for a TV show, which eventually got picked up and it did in Nepal. It was a Discovery Channel show called The Supernaturalist. So I worked on that for about 2 years. And that was a lot of fun, really amazing. And that, like you said, it's sort of all of the training sort of came to a fruition because I was able to figure out how to navigate myself away or around a television show,
And what year was that?
I think that was about 2009 or 10.
Right. So that was
Yeah.
still back in the boom of Magic TV. You're still one of the first in terms of Magic TV shows of that nature, I imagine.
I think so. There was a lot going on, but it wasn't. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there was as much content as there is now, on television. But yeah, it was definitely a big deal for me, and it was really cool. I mean, we got to go. I got to go to Nepal. Just that by itself, just being able to go there, I was happy with. But it was good too because it was one of those things where I thought, I felt like I could handle it all myself. Looking back on it, I wish I had, done things differently as far as the magic production of the whole thing. But I learned a lot from that experience. That I would have liked to have had more magic and different types of magic and this, that, and the other thing. But you always look back on your shows and you're like, I could have done that differently, and you know what I mean.
Totally. And it's good to know that even like the best who produce a show, right, like produced it themselves and started it, and like it's a feature, all this great stuff, and even still you look back on it and you say, I wish I would have done this differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody does, even every single person, and I think being a perfectionist, especially in this sort of field, is not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's the plight of the artist that as we grow, we look back and we say, "How stupid was I, and how awful was I?" So let's continue on the journey. So, how did you start working for David Copperfield?
Just from so there's all these concurrent threads going on, and I really wish I could separate them in a really well. But there's after or while working with David, or after working with David, I'd also got to know a guy named Jonathan Boehm, really well. And he started a company called Theory 11 right around that time, and just from knowing him, hanging out with him, I also got to meet Chris Kenner, because he was a part of Theory 11, and that's sort of that was the next step with Dave Copperfield. Chris just gave me a call one day and said, "Hey, do you want to come out to Vegas?" And I was like, "There's no way I can say no to that."
Yeah. So it seems like one of the themes that keeps coming through is your ability but also your choice to continually work on a team.
Yes, I think that's the most important thing.
So talk to me about that, and how you sort of, I don't want to say like I'll use that to climb the ladder, but it at least has allowed you to work in so many different areas and also like gradually grow. So talk a little bit about that. How are you doing that? How can somebody who wants to be a part of project, do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, personal relationships are extremely important to everything that you decide to do. And for me, I mean, or for advice that I would give for people who want to work in those things, it's not like I just showed up and just asked. It wasn't, like you had mentioned, it wasn't just the asking. It was obviously, there had to be a kinship. There had to be some sort of like-mindedness. And there had to be some sort of spark that was had between two people, three people, four people, to get to that point. So, in anything that you might pursue, if you can find the people that are like-minded, that are doing things that you are interested in or aspire to, it's a good place to be and to surround yourself with that, because like-minded people want to do like-minded things, and they want to do them together. And everybody's always looking for help, you know.
Yeah. I was gonna say, are there any strategies that you use to, like, when there's a new group of people, or when there's like a group that you want to work with, like, what are you doing to showcase yourself?
No, there's not really. And I honestly, I got to tell you, I think I'm really terrible at showcasing myself, like sort of standing out. I'm not the person in the group who's like, hey, look at me, you guys want to hire me, blah blah blah. It's always more just like, hey, I'm really interested in that thing too. Let me show you what I'm thinking about it, or let me tell you what ideas I have about it. It's very much natural, and it really does come from a place of love. You know, it's it's always about like what's best and what ideas I have and what ideas I can share and help with. And it's the same thing with people that I meet who might want to work with me. You know, it's always a natural thing. You know, it's never like a, hey, I want to work for you. Here's my resume. Okay, you're hired. You know, it's never that sort of thing. I mean, when we're talking about it right now, it seems very short. You know, everything's sort of short. Boom, open a door, walk in. You know, it's not that. It's very much, you know, relationships are created, real, long-lasting relationships are created, you know, because
Totally.
of the right reasons, you know.
You know, I recently befriended somebody in Magic who I met at Magi Fest, and we've been like exchanging and helping each other with Magic. And I don't know why I reached out to him and told him that we should start exchanging Magic videos and helping each other, but just something felt right. You know what I mean? Like, I just
Yeah.
felt this guy, like, we're just connecting,
Well, so that's the thing. Like in 10 years, right? If you guys do something together and you're talking about it on a podcast later on, you know, you'll probably condense it to be like, oh, yeah, I met this guy and then we did this show. Do you
right,
know what I
right,
mean?
right,
Like
right, right,
that's how
right,
it
right, right.
condensed to later on. But, you know, when in the actual reality of it, it's like, no, you became friends. Then you had some ideas, shared some ideas. This, that, the other thing happened. Opportunity popped up, you know, and then all of a sudden you're doing great things, you know. So it's not, there's never that much foresight. It's always just out of a place of love for magic, you know, or
Totally.
whatever it is you're doing.
Totally. I love that. You know, if I can pull or distill one part out of that that I think is something for people to remember, is just that, like, that passion and that giving, right? If someone does something and you've got like advice or more ideas to share or whatever, like, it's that getting excited about, you know, someone else's project and giving them a hand, not because
Yeah,
you're
and
like,
well, I
hope I
actually
get
think
ahead.
that's,
Right?
if anything, it's better to be more giving and less transactional about the whole thing,
Yeah.
because that's what you know, sort of cements the relationship.
Hmm.
That's what will really like sort of make your powers combined, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. To be greater than the sum of your parts. So let's talk a little bit about working with David Copperfield. What were you doing for him?
Yeah, so I was working backstage with a group of guys. I'm sure you've heard of many of them. Robert Smith was there as well. Blake Voigt, Kayla Morelli, Patrick Kuhn, Homer Leewag, and Chris Kenner. And yeah, it was great. It was a lot of fun. We were coming up with really cool ideas, and it was nonstop magic. Really, legitimately nonstop.
So one of the things I was going to ask is, like, how much, you know, he's touring with a show. You know, I think about my magic, and I'm doing like the same. I'm performing multiple times a week, every week, but I'm doing the same tricks for like long periods of time, right? So how often are new tricks being implemented? And really, my question is, where does David Copperfield go to suck before he's great? You know what I mean? Like, on a new
Right,
trick, like, I couldn't do a new trick every night, because I would be like, this, I haven't written the script for that. You know what I mean? Like, there's so
right,
much more
right.
that goes into each
Well,
piece. So
so I mean, he has a show permanently at you know in Vegas, and I really can't go too much into like his whole work methods, but he is working every single moment that he's not on stage. Do you know what I mean?
oh,
So
okay.
there's tons of time for him to do things that are working on the new material, and you know, since he had like a bunch of guys backstage, you know, working on new stuff, that helped a lot as well. And there was a lot of new stuff, you know, that we came up with.
So a lot of times you guys are potentially, I guess you can't talk about it, but you're potentially working, you know, well ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and and he still is. I mean, it's a nonstop magic fest. over
Well,
there.
that's why he's the best. So there
Yeah,
you go.
absolutely.
And then so keep going with me along the journey. So you finished working with David Copperfield, and where did you go? What was the next step?
So after working with David, I did another TV show for the Travel Channel, which was we did 2 episodes. It was a pilot thing, just a small thing. It was called White Magic. It was on Travel Channel, and then after that, came back to New York. Did a bunch of various gigs and things like that. Sort of, just gigging, being just sort of the gigging magician. And then I got a call all the while, working with JB and putting out products. And there's all little things that, you know what I mean, like have been happening. Doing some TV spots and doing some commercials. I did a commercial for HP, but anyway, a lot of little stuff. And then from working with JB, we got a call from a restaurant in New York called 11 Madison Park, which, if you don't know, is a really, really incredible restaurant in New York City. It's just is listed as one of like the top restaurants in the world, if not the top. It's gotten the title as the best restaurant in the world a couple of times. So we got a call from them. They wanted to make some playing cards for the restaurant, but also wanted to do a magic trick in their dessert course for the restaurant, because they do their meals are a series of in or around 10 different courses. And each course is a theatrically really interesting or a different theme. So at that time they wanted to do kind of a magic trick or like something that related to 3-card Monte, because they're in New York, and so I worked with them, and we came up with a really cool thing to do at the restaurant, where diners were presented with their course before their dessert course. Each one of them had a plate and a thing on top of the plate that they ate, which was before the dessert course. And the waiter would come around and have a deck of cards with all different ingredients, really beautifully designed on the playing cards, and each person who was at the table picked a different uh, ingredient that was on the card. So we're talking like, hazelnut or pear, or, all different types of food. And then after they picked those cards, they were told to lift up their plate. And inside of the plate that was sitting on them from the course that they had before was a smaller, tinier plate.
Oh,
And on that
wow.
plate was the ingredient that they had chosen.
That's
It was a
awesome.
chocolate version of the ingredient that they
That's
chose.
awesome.
Yeah, it was really cool, and people loved it. It was very, very kind of a neat thing. But from there, working with the people who own that restaurant is a guy named Will Gadara and Daniel Hume, sort of cultivated this relationship with these restaurateurs who also happen to really love magic. Just they have a love for it, and I think there's a kindred spirit in the idea of hospitality, and really good hospitality and dining service that's very similar to magic. Whereas I think both those things really want to entertain their guests, but also surprise them and like kind of
Hmm.
enthrall them and give them that
Surprise
same
and
sort of
delight. Yeah.
that same sort of amazement. And when you're in fine dining, you really, your duty is to amaze. uh, People aren't paying just to be fed.
They can feed themselves. They're paying for
Right.
the entire experience.
Exactly. So when they decided to open up another restaurant in the hotel, the Nomad Hotel, I had already sort of been working with them, and we knew of each other, and they had a couple events where they do these really cool things at Halloween called the Masquerade, the Nomad Masquerade, where they take out the whole second floor of the hotel and they turn it into this really wild, interactive. I don't want to say like fun house. I don't want to say like haunted house, but it's kind of in that vein, but it's a lot more interesting and in depth. They take this whole hotel, and each room is a different kind of experience.
Oh yeah.
Some are kind of fun, some kind of wacky. All the while, each one of those rooms are presenting people with interesting drinks and interesting food. It's a black tie masked affair, and
Is this?
it
Are you
was
talking
really
about? Is
cool.
this Sleep No More?
No, it's not Sleep
Oh,
No
oh,
More,
oh,
but
oh, oh.
there's something there. There's definitely a feeling of that, but it's
Right, right,
more, it's like more of the masquerade, more of black tie sort of a
right, right, right.
function, and
Okay,
it
continue.
only happens on Halloween. And then they started. It was they had a few magicians in some of these rooms, and the magicians would do magic for people as they came in. And so I was one of those magicians, and I
Oh,
helped with
cool.
picking out the other magicians, and some of them did walk around, and there's a lot of magic in the whole thing. And then we did that for a couple years, and a few years later, Will, the owner, Will Gadara, he was like, we've got this other room in the hotel, and we do these jazz nights on Thursday nights. Would you like to do like a magic night on Friday night or Wednesday night? And I said, sure, of course, I would love to do that. But I don't want to just do like a thing where I just come in and there's a stage and I do like an open mic thing. That wasn't that interesting to me. I mean, I could do that, but that wasn't like, well, I wanted to do like if I was going to do this, I wanted it to be like a real full show, you know? And then he said, yeah, let's do it. So we started working on this show with, for a year, really kind of putting it together, coming up with ideas, writing the whole thing.
So talk to me about that process for a bit. So you decided that you're going to do a show and not just a series of tricks, maybe, a show, an actual show. And then what were those first steps that you took to start putting that into place? Because what it seems like from everything so far is, gigging and helping with projects and producing and whatever, that this might have been the first real opportunity to put on like a show, right? Not just,
Yeah, no,
right? Like
absolutely.
so this is a
And
big
I
opportunity.
was I was nervous as hell.
Yeah.
It because I was very used to doing walk around magic. That was always like my thing, right? And then I was also very used to doing the consulting. And as far as stand up magic go, I don't think I'd ever really performed before that moment more than 7 minutes on stage, at one
It's
single time.
insanity.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So like the
it's
longest sets
insanity.
I ever did were 7-10 minutes, the
Right.
longest. And so the idea of having to do 2 hours, I was like, oh my God. Every day I was like, what did I get myself into? This is going to be the biggest failure. I'm going to look like a fool. What am I doing? Um, so yeah, I think in that moment, decided to like, okay, if I'm a little nervous about how I am as a performer on stage, let me make this like the whole experience just really, really good. Everything else that's not me really good,
Right.
And so I think that sort of pushed me to come up with really kind of cool ideas for like what the whole show was about. I just didn't want it to be, here's Dan White who's doing his magic for two
Right,
hours.
right.
It was like,
Yeah.
okay, no, I needed to be more than that because I don't know if I'm going to be good enough to do the rest of it.
Totally,
Uh,
like, yeah, you feel like you wanna, make all the other things feel so great so that just in case I'm not very
right,
good,
right.
it's okay.
But then on top of that, I actually wanted those other things because that's what I would
Of
want to see
course.
too.
And like we were saying before, it's the whole experience, right?
Exactly.
When you started putting that show together, did you immediately rush towards putting together a team? And did you just call everyone a magic consultant, or was there rhyme to bringing people on to help you? Because I know that you work with a team now, and I'm sure that sort of team aspect has slowly grown and changed and developed over 4 years. But talk to me about those first
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of it, it was really just me, uh, JB, and Blake Voigt. We just sort of like and it was a lot of me taking long walks and calling JB and being like, "What do you think about this first story?" Because I wanted to nail down a narrative or a reason for the whole thing first. That was the most important part, and that was the thing that took the longest. Really, is like to give the whole thing a larger uh, narrative other than just a bunch of magic tricks. Yeah. So that I worked with him the most on that, and then started working with Blake, as far as coming up with the tricks. And I, purposely kind of kept it small, as far as like who I was working with, as far as that team. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to call everybody that I know to come up with stuff. It was like, I think that Blake and JB and myself, so from there, just going back and forth with them. I had a couple friends And then so then there was also like obviously sometimes, and this is goes for TV or any sort of production. There's certain tricks or certain ideas that you want to have, larger ideas that then you can call in specialists for, and that's what I did. There was a bunch of different effects where it's like, okay, so I know this guy's really good at this, so I'm going to reach out to, like someone like Craig Dickens in L.A. who can help me build this thing. Or, I had a friend in Philadelphia named Seth Rovner. I was like, okay, I need some help with this. Or Dan Haas, like those sort of things. So then it was sort of just branching out. Another friend named Warren Adcock, who's a writer, so I would like reach out to him. What do you think about this? So it was sort of all like just, you know, all these friends that I've made over the years from in this same industry, you know, using those contacts to like try to figure out if there's ways to make things that I was thinking about better or even possible.
Yeah. In the process of making a show, like you just said, you're bringing all of these people on board to help make it happen. And the goal at the outset to make a show that's more than just a series of tricks, right? So without exposing the contents of the show itself, like what did you do? What is going through your head so that you can make a show more than like what are the actual thoughts and steps that allow you to make it more than just a bunch of tricks?
For me, it was I know I have these people's attention from the moment they walk in the door until the moment they leave. So I was trying to think of every single thing that could possibly happen from that moment and really trying to bring it as far back to the moment that they buy the tickets as I can.
Oh, you wanna bring
And
it to that moment.
yeah, like that's I have their attention from that moment. So
Right.
might as well, think about
Right,
every single
right,
step
right,
along
right.
the way that I can do stuff with. And it really was just a process of like what would be cool. It wasn't it was very very simple. It was like what would be cool, and then once we figure out what's cool, how do I make it make sense for what I'm doing?
Part of that I think is so awesome about the what would be cool, and I use a similar thinking all the time in my head, but, the what would be cool, it makes it feel like what we do, it's like we're kids again, right? Like we're jamming and we're 13 years old with cards and we're going like, "Oh, you know what would be cool? Da 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 da," right? Or, "You know what would be cool?" That's what we get to do for a living, and I think that oftentimes we complicate things by saying like, "Oh, what's the perfect piece? What makes sense here? What?" And obviously that stuff has its place, but just at the outset, just saying like, "What do I want to actually do on the stage?" And what would be fun and what would be cool? What would just be great? What would be a blast to do? That stuff is how you end up doing things that are creative because you're like fulfilling your
Yeah,
wishes.
absolutely. Well, an example of that with the show is I had always really loved the Metropolitan Opera House in New York, and I'd gone there recently before doing the show, and they do this really cool thing where the chandeliers are on the ground at the beginning or they're lowered, and right before the show they just rise up and the show starts. I've always loved that. I just thought it was a cool moment because for me, when you go to theater or movie or any sort of experience, the first few minutes really should try to suck you out of reality and put you in that space, like really ground you in that space. And that is one of those things that really did that for me. So when I started working in this room, and by the way, the room that I do the show in is very small, and it's not a theater; it's a conference room. So the idea of taking a
How many
conference room and
people is it?
turning it
Like
into
80 or
yeah,
90 or
about
yeah,
80 people.
yeah.
Yeah, taking a conference room and turning it into a magic stage is a daunting task. It's not meant for what we do. So I needed ideas for like things to make it feel more like it was a theatrical thing. So that was one thing where I really want to make the lights that go up and down. So we had this. Went to some builder in Brooklyn to make these really cool automated light bulbs that rise up and down and are at our command and perform little things. Um, and that was like a really big deal for me. So that was like one of the first things that I was like, okay, I need to get that in there. But that just came from a thing just in my head of, oh, that's cool, you know.
One of the things that I'm thinking about all the time is something that is called just in case learning versus just in time learning. And they're pretty self-explanatory, but we're often doing just in case learning, which is when we're just like learn and we just keep learning and learning and learning. And what's interesting is in executing and doing things and taking advantage of opportunity, often it's just in time learning, which is when you say, oh, we have to figure out how to make lights that move. And they're like, okay, let's call the guy we know who can make lights that move, right? And you learn each thing as you need it. And I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up because it sounds like that's a tool that's used in biting off more than you can chew, or agreeing to do things that you've never done before ever.
I think that's the MO of anybody in like TV or production or any sort of thing where it's like everything seems cool and then all of a sudden you need something immediately. And then you figure it out.
Walk me through a little bit more of that journey, of that year. Did you tell him like, give me a year and we'll have it? Or did you kind of say like, let me start working on a show? Was it like, did you self-impose?
Yeah, it was sort of, it was, there was no real time limit on it at the beginning. And it was sort of like we were taking each month. It's like, okay, I'm going to need a little bit more time, or they need a little bit more time to do this, or so. But we finally eventually nailed a date, and then once we nailed that date down, it was probably like 3 months until that date, and that's when like my crunch time really sort of was the clock was ticking. But at that point, I already had the story and the idea and all those sort of like things worked out. But at that 3 months time, that's when it was like, okay, things need to get made and built and rehearsed, and that's when that real crunch time happened.
And in the executing of the show, obviously, I imagine like the 10th show is way better than the first show and the 100th show and so on and so on. But talk to me a little bit about how you develop and integrate new magic and keep it fresh, or what it is that you're doing to make this feel amazing 4 years of doing 4 shows a weekend every, you know what I mean, like what you're doing to keep this fresh and exciting for you and your team.
Yeah, so what's great is that, just mentioning the fact that I do Tonight Show is because, I've done it 10 times. We're always working on new routines for this Tonight Show, So there's a lot of times where in the show that I do, I throw in the material that I'm going to do.
Tonight Show material.
Exactly. Right. And that's always like, a lot of fun and very stressful, because anytime you try new material, it's super stressful. I still can't believe that the first show that I did was probably only like the third time I'd actually really ever performed the show. So I can't believe I did a whole show of rehearsal pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Even your rehearsal was the first time you ever done anything like that.
Exactly. So I've even just seen how like nervous and excited and how your mind goes into full overdrive when you're just trying one new routine. I can't believe I did that for an entire show, but those are always really fun moments when we're working on brand new stuff, and there's a reason to be working on brand new stuff all the time, every couple months. You know what I mean?
And how often are you working on new stuff that goes into the show versus the Tonight Show?
Well, that's the thing. A lot of this stuff, sometimes there's been a couple of routines where we've done a Tonight Show. Then I'm like, you know what? I like this. I'm going to keep this in the show. But there's been a lot of stuff, even the stuff that I like the most from the Tonight Show that hasn't gone in the show just because it doesn't translate as well. Honestly, it's kind of weird. I feel like some of the stuff that's worked best in the show has worked the worst on TV. So you never know how that's going to play out.
The environment dictates so much that it's like, anytime you go on TV, it's different than whatever you had planned, I imagine. Like
Exactly. It really is.
So let's talk a little bit about those 10 appearances on the Tonight Show. So how did that opportunity start, and how did you become like the go-to Tonight Show magician?
So Jimmy came to literally, I think it was the second half of the very first show that I did.
Oh, wow.
So that made the stress even greater because, like I said, it's only been done 3 times, and he saw, a good 45 minutes of the show, that was very fresh to me, very, very fresh.
Gosh.
And it's a complicated show. It's not just like, 5 or 6 routines, but, we have a lot of
moving parts,
music and sound and light and all that sort of stuff, so there's a lot of things that could have gone wrong, but it ended up going very well, and he came in and saw the second half of it, and from there he just said, hey, let's have him on, and he really hadn't had that many magicians on before, So it was kind of a perfect opportunity, and we went on, and I guess people liked it, so we came back. And I mean, it was pretty much as simple as that.
Talk about some of the things that you had in mind or that you have in mind when putting together magic for television.
Here's the thing: there's it's television, and there's the Tonight Show.
Right,
For me
right.
in my head, there's obviously multiple ways to present magic on TV. I know when I have to, you go on the Tonight Show. For me, it's very important that we do something that is very much on brand with both what I do, but also what he does. And I try to keep things fun and entertaining. And we've always known that he loves games, and that show has a lot of games. So I and there's so much magic that kind of feels like that game type thing. You're making a lot of choices, things are happening. Um, so for me, that's I tried to keep it in that vein of his style of performance. So there's a couple things that I always really love in routines that I choose to do for the Tonight Show. One of which is obviously being fun and entertaining and something that doesn't bore people. But secondly, things that have phases. I think that's important for talk show appearances, especially is it needs to, not just be one and done. There should be multiple reveals and multiple hits. And then I just try to get as many people involved as possible. And for me, if a routine can do all of those things, then I'm pretty happy with it.
And is there something that is there anything that you like keep in mind, with your team? How do you know? Do you come up with like 10 different things to be on an upcoming show and then pick the best one? Or how do you like what sort of process do you go through? How soon from knowing that you're going to be on the next time do you have to
Yeah,
create one, or do you have
it's
them in the bank?
interesting. Each time is different. There's been times where I had like six ideas, and there's like, okay, which one's the best? And then we had to debate going back on that. But there's been other times where it's like, I've got nothing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So
And then
and
how long of a timeline is that?
usually it's probably I'd say about a month at this
Okay.
point. Sometimes it's been shorter.
So it's just
Sometimes
enough
I've
time to
known
be stressful.
a week, right? Sometimes I've known like a week ahead of time. Sometimes I've
See,
known
that's
longer.
crazy.
And yeah, so yeah, there's no one real like if it was a little bit more structured, I think it would be different. But unfortunately, I wish I could just have a list of like, oh, here's 20 things that I've got. But every day you wake up and you're like, oh man, I don't like that thing anymore. Screw that. Never going to do that. I don't know why I even thought about that before. So like a whole halves of lists can just disappear in a day because it's not exactly what you want.
I know that you specified a little bit between that when you're doing stuff for the Tonight Show, that it's not just for television, but it's for the Tonight Show. How do you think about um, putting magic in your show? And also, how often is magic in your show? I know you said like anytime there's a Tonight Show trick, that's kind of the next thing maybe up for grabs to swap into the show potentially. How often are you putting new things into the show, and how often are changes being made? Not just the micro changes, but maybe major changes and new things that you have to test and try again.
Honestly, we try to keep the changes to a minimum. We'll try new routines. Probably every 2 months we'll throw in a new thing. But they don't always last. That we just happened to put a new thing in probably 3 months ago that happened to stick. We like it a lot, and we swapped it out for what was there before. And But other than that, and there's been so much. I mean, like there's probably I would say probably a dozen tricks that were at one point in the show, solidly in the show on repeat, that I've taken out. And it was a process of streamlining. Less is more, I think, especially with people who are drinking and at night. You got to like really hit them hard, and. And then whenever we do put new stuff in, it's usually a product of something that's been sort of eating away at me, or or something that's new that we're like really really like this thing, or oh, we hadn't thought about this. You know what I mean? So it's very organic. There's no like, okay, next month we need to put in a new thing. It's not like that. It's like we put in a new thing when we feel like there needs to be a new thing, or if we feel like there's a weak spot. Um, there's that thing, like, you do feel as a creator and a magician, a performer, there's a lot of pressure, like, oh, you got to do something new, do something new, do something new. But there's also really something very important about, if you do something well, people want to see it. Do you know what I mean?
For
Like,
sure.
do what works,
For sure. And also, I think it was Johnny Thompson who said it on the podcast, but I don't remember, but I could be wrong. But he said something like, once you're just feeling sick and tired of your trick because you've been doing it for so long, just then that's when it's starting to get good. Like
Yeah,
that's when it's starting to get ready for actual audiences to see it.
that's
And I
true.
love that. And I think about it too, right? It's on the other side of like I've done this a lot. It's on the other side of that it actually gets good.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the experience that's going on in your head when you're on stage is so much the opposite of the experience that's going on in the spectator's head. So, yeah, to keep that in mind, no matter, like, if they're reacting, if they're loving it, then that's the mark, that's the
yeah,
scale.
yeah, and that's the metric that you measure it against is what the audience thinks about it, and that is
Yeah, there's plenty of stuff that I do that I'm like, it's not my favorite thing. But when you see people love it, you know what I mean? It's like, I can't, I gotta,
right.
you
And
know,
you also, and it's hard because you have to forget that it's not your favorite thing because you've done it 1,000 times. But that's what, right? Like it's not your favorite thing because you don't like. It's just you're sick and tired of it, right? But for them, it's fresh, and they're seeing it for the very first time. In terms of your team, I'd love to know how much of what you're working on together is creating, and how much of it is executing.
I mean, I think it's always a process, so it always starts as something that we just might say to each other while we're walking to get a slice of pizza, just like the seed of an idea. Just to give you a sort of a layout of, what my situation is. I work with a bunch of guys, but primarily on the show, it's myself as far as magicians, uh, B. Smith, John Stessel, and Jonathan Bain. And we don't live near each other. We don't hang out that much during the week, but we still love magic all the time and think about magic all the time on our own. So when we come together to do the shows on the weekend, that's when we can sort of bounce off all the ideas that we've been thinking about during the rest of the week. So it's kind of like we don't have like a sit down, like if we were going to do a TV show tomorrow, we would have to sit down and be like, okay, let's just spitball random ideas and like throw out all these different things that we've been thinking about, or things like that. But that's not how that works with this, because we're doing sort of a weekly thing and we know we're going to see each other every week. So it's more like during the week we'll have our own lives, have our own thoughts,
You
and
let it
then
bounce
when we
around
come
in your
together to do
brain.
this
Yeah,
show,
exactly.
right, then we're sort of throwing them together at that point. And it's sort of on those conversations that we have, that's when it sort of turns into the, okay, I really like this idea, and then we just keep going with that, and then they just eventually turn into something, you know.
Wow. That's great because I guess in my head I just thought of the creative team just sitting at the table all day, working on stuff. But
Which
obviously that's not like
it would be if there was more of like a, okay, we have this TV show coming up in 6 months. But since it's more open form, since it's just kind of an ongoing show, it doesn't need to be that sort of like time crunch sort of thing.
right. Let's talk a little bit about the marketing and the sales of the show itself. It's a show that is constantly sold out. People hear about it, but not only people going to New York, but also like celebrities and the best of the best, and everyone's hearing about this show, and no one can get tickets. And so, what's going on? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's. I wish I could give you the right answer, but to be honest with you, it's all very natural, and it wasn't forced. And I think that's sort of why it's worked so well. At the beginning, so like I mentioned, 11 Madison Park is really well known for being the best restaurant, right? In New York, if not the world. And then there's their hotel and the Nomad, also really well known for being a really great restaurant. So the fact that we were partnered with them gave me a great amount of cred, but then also, the right clientele that we wanted to have at the show, and the ability to market to all of the people who've been to these restaurants before know what an amazing job these guys do at their restaurants. How would they handle a show? So that's sort of what got the ball rolling. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know where we'd be. But that was the thing that really got it, was they're basically just the reputation of the place we were doing it in. They were known for doing everything very well. But at that point, after that, people really love the show, and it's been a word of mouth thing ever since. And we've purposefully not done advertising and not done any marketing. We throw out some on, click stuff, on Instagram, like little stuff, no billboards, no newspapers, no, ad buys, nothing like that. But and the reason why is because we haven't needed it, one, but also I think because of the lack of information about the thing, especially with something that is mysterious in its nature, like it has to be, since it's a magic show.
Yeah.
Having mystery around everything around it is they goes hand in hand, and it seems just to make complete sense. I talked to a class at Columbia on marketing, and especially for stage and theatrical stuff. And my whole thing to them, what I was trying to explain to them is like, there's nothing stronger than forcing somebody to ask a question. I'm not telling them what I want them. I'm not telling people what I want them to know. They're being intrigued because
Your
they
lack
don't
of
know
information is giving them questions.
exactly.
Yeah.
How many times if you just see something, or you have a thought pops into your head and you see something on the street, or you hear about someone where you're like, oh, I need to Google that. I'm really curious about that. Right. That is so much stronger than someone telling you to go to a website,
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I think happened with this show. And I think is really valuable, is the idea that you're giving them more questions than answers. And whenever you give somebody a question, they become more engaged.
It's obvious if you think about like a beautiful location with a shitty show would not work, and an amazing show in a gutty location like is not going to work either. And like all of these different things, a great location with a great show with awful food is going to be a problem, right? Like it like it all stacks. So it's all a part of it. It's all a part of the all a part of the experience. And it seems like you and the Nomad and the restaurant care so much about the experience that this sort of like feels like no stone left unturned kind of thing on making sure that from buying a ticket to staying at the hotel to getting the food to everything, they're just having like incredible experiences.
And yeah, that's the thing. At the end of the day, I just want people to have a good experience. I want them to have fun.
And especially a lot of the time it's like celebrities or out of towners and tourists and stuff, right, who just get to have like such an incredible experience in New York. And that's such a great part of New York, right, is someone gets to come and say what's going on here, and they hear about this thing and they like somehow get tickets, and then they have a mind-blowing experience, right? And that whole journey is all part of it.
Right. The other part of it, and that I really didn't touch on that much, is just the what you said, is like the fact that the tickets are so hard to get makes the tickets harder to get. If that makes any sense. Anytime in New York you have something that people want to get into but they can't, immediately that's the best marketing you could ever have.
Yeah, they're lining up for that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about it, like,
That's how you start the marketing.
right, you say the
The
first event
headline.
is sold out, and they're like, "Were there any tickets
Right.
available?" You're like, "No."
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
for sure, and that's the big like New York and LA thing is like, there's a big party and you
Mm,
can't come. It's like, ah, shit.
exactly. But I really want to go. I didn't even want to go before, but now I really want to
I
go.
didn't know about it, but now I have to go. I can't not go.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the way that the tickets are released. They're released at 10 a.m. on the day of the show.
So there's a couple different ways, and the only reason why it happens in this kind of strange way is because of the fact that we aren't in our own dedicated theater. The place isn't a theater; it's also used as like I said, as a conference room. So we share the room, the room with the hotel. So there are times where they need the room, or it's booked out for some other event. So we only release our tickets 3 weeks in advance. So because of that, we have the ticket sort of window open in the morning for tickets 3 weeks in advance. And then but then there's also on the day of shows, sometimes there'll be cancellations, or there's certain times where we'll throw up tickets for the night of, but usually it's 3 weeks in advance.
Wow. And is there any other aspect to, you're producing the show, are, as to where people are hearing about the show? Because it's one thing to say, like, it's a show, it's a secret, it's often sold out, so people want to know about it. I know people are hearing about it a lot from like the Nomad. Is there any other aspect or any other thing that someone can take from this,
Yes.
that where it's all coming from?
Yeah. So, like I said, people know it primarily from word of mouth or from the Tonight Show, and those are the two places. So I do obviously some TV spots, morning shows, things like that, random print sort of articles every once in a while, and we have a great PR team behind the show, and we do a lot of. So that's a really important thing. So when you mentioned marketing, in my head, I was thinking more of the things that we actually like purchase as
Right.
far as like
paid
a
ads and
budget.
stuff. Yeah.
But PR is a really big part of it. And at the beginning, like I mentioned, that notoriety of the hotel really helped sell those tickets at the beginning. But if it wasn't for the PR team behind us who like sort of put out those releases to people in the industry, they wouldn't. Nobody would have known about it. And the fact that I do go on the Tonight Show, and I do different TV shows during
Right.
the
It gives
week,
them more
and
stuff to use to
exactly. But and the reason why I don't think about it as marketing is because I feel like it's a lot more organic. It's like you'd expect me to do those things, and I'm not forcing it. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, you're not like
Um,
looking for the paid opportunity. Like, hey, like, how can I get on your show to find out? Like, this is just being featured, and hopefully because of a great PR team.
exactly, and it's all very, 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 very natural. It's funny, actually, our second show was a full PR show. It was a full press show. We had everybody from every major newspaper and everybody, and it was seriously the third show I'd ever done of it, and this was even before we really opened to the public. And it was like the worst show. So I thought from that moment on, it was going to be like, oh, we really screwed that one up. But it didn't seem to hinder it too much. I think one thing that I've learned from just doing the show, from going from nothing to doing it now almost 800 times. Maybe more than that now, is the ability to connect with your audience. And I know a lot of people talk about that, but I think that's the most important thing. You have to feel like a real person, and you have to feel like somebody who they would care about or they would like, and
So
how
talk to me
much of a
about that.
difference.
So one of the things that I always struggle
Yeah,
with
I
in
mean,
magic is that we're doing impossible things, right? So I always find that it's super hard to relate because we're doing stuff that is out of the ordinary, right? So we're not talking about the things that everyone experiences in every day. But then again, it's obviously so important to connect people and reach them where they are, and things like that. So what strategies, what can somebody do to help connect to their audience?
So for me, the way I learned it is just by doing it. When I first went out there, I was like, okay, I've got these great tricks. These are going to be great, and I know these are going to work, and that was great, and they did. But over time, it was like, oh, I could get so much out of this if I said this differently, or I acted this way, or little, sort of just social cues that you even learn from talking to people. Um, just in your daily life, you see different results when you interact with people a different sort of way. And that's what it was like for me on stage. It was like, okay, I can deliver a line this way or deliver that. And I'm not even talking about jokes or integral parts of the magic. I'm just talking about normal things that I would say, just the kind of middle ground stuff. How to feel more like a real person. Basically, and a nice person, and somebody that cares. And one thing I say at the beginning of my show is like, and it's important, is that I don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. And I don't. I know that there's inherently, as when someone's coming to a magic show, there's a little bit of there's there's nerves, but there's also like a antagonistic side to going to a magic show. You're going in there. I'm going to figure it out. Oh, is this guy any good? He's not going to fool me. Like there's kind of like this challenge aspects that's set up, and I want to get rid of that as fast as I can because I think that I don't feel good when I feel like my spectators are feeling that way, and they don't feel good when I'm feeling that way back to them. So it's like I want to get it out of the way where it's like, no, I might fool you, but it's not because I'm trying to make you feel stupid. Yeah. I'm just trying to entertain you, and this is my form of entertaining you.
Wow. That's great. And I think, one of the key ideas there, which you were touching on, is trying to be super authentic, right? Like that is true from both sides. Like that's not like a secret of the magician. You're like, I'm here to enter. Like you can almost say that to them bluntly, right? Like,
absolutely. I think it's better. There's a lot of things in the show. I just say them bluntly, just be honest. Sometimes it's the best.
Yeah, I think so much of this comes down to being authentic, and a lot of that's a lot of what I see in what you're doing is like you're giving them the experience. Like, I mean, the experience is happening like in the present moment. Like, they're buying a ticket, that's the experience. Like they're getting ready for the show, that's the experience. They're going, that's the experience. You're like telling them like drop your guard about being like, is this guy any good? And I love that. People do say that all the time before shows because it's kind of like, am I going to be smarter than this guy?
Yeah, and I think that's it's like such a good exercise. It's just really putting yourself into the spectator's shoes. Think about all of the things that are going to go through that person's head before, during, and after the show. But like really delving deep, not just like, oh, how did he do that? I know how I did that. Not just that, but like really like, oh, I don't like that way those. Yeah, like, oh, that guy's shoes. That guy's shoes didn't. I don't like his shoes. Or this place smells kind of weird. Or like those little things. Or they're gonna make fun of me if I sit in the front row. Like things like that are all those things that people are having in their head, and at the end of the day, you just got to make them happy.
Yeah. The better you can see that, the better you can visualize what they're seeing, the better you can give them, a really great show. One of the last things I wanted to ask you before we start wrapping up is, I wanted to talk about, people are often talking about the mixture of magic and mentalism, and I don't really know. Like to me, it's never really been a big deal, and the reason I say that is if you're a mentalist, like mentalist exclusive, then you're usually diving into that character, and then if you're mixing them, in my opinion, they're both kind of treated like magic, but one is more like mental magic. So I don't really have a big separation, but you seem to be doing both of them, and also more specifically, a lot of close-up magic and mentalism, which are two fields that seem like they're different, right? Street magic and mind read, they don't seem like they're the same. So talk a little bit about putting those two together.
Yeah. So mentalism has always been sort of like my favorite genre, I guess, of magic. And because of that, this question is definitely something that I've struggled with a lot. If you're going to be a mentalist, you got to be a mentalist, because if you start doing magic, it's not as believable. That's what I thought, at least. And I think partially it's true. But for me, I decided to become a magician or call myself a magician, I should say, because I just felt like I had more ability to do more stuff that I liked. I mean, it just comes down to that, as simple as that. As a mentalist, I'd be able. I think there's a point when you call yourself a mentalist where the spectator, I don't want to say buys it a little bit more, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Like it's more believable when you call yourself a mentalist and you do these things. I decided to put that aside in order to do more of the stuff that I liked, because there's so much close-up stuff, that card stuff, so much just random other stuff that I would hate to get rid of, just because I want to call myself a mentalist. And for me, when just from working on TV shows and other things with other people, there's a whole part of my life where we didn't even go into, where I was working and consulting with musicians and things like that. Like I worked with Kanye West for a while, but that from doing those other things, it made me realize that the most important parts of shows, the best shows, are the ones that take you on like up and down journeys, peaks and valleys, you know. And I didn't want to have a show where everything felt the same. Yeah, I've seen a lot of magic shows where the whole, even wonderful magic shows, yeah, where it's just like across the board, same thing. And I think it's important to really have those sort of ups and down moments, those slow moments, those fast movements, those really, sexy moments or hard moments or gruesome moments, but like really having a full variety of those things. And I felt like by constraining myself just to one specific genre of magic or just calling myself a mentalist, it would be harder for me to do all of those other things which I like, which I would be able to get more emotion out of. And I think, when I really look at, I've always looked up to David Copperfield as like, he was always my hero, and like I really loved everything that he's done. And he, more so than anybody, I think, is really able to get the most emotion out of magic that I've ever seen. I think I know myself, and a couple of my friends who are magicians, pretty well-known magicians, have kind of, in their mind, like always, you're always kind of comparing yourself to other artists and other art forms.
Yeah.
And I know that as a magician, what I would really love to be is a musician.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
interesting.
Like not that I want to do, not that I want to perform music, but it's
Hmm.
just the ability that music is able to give, that emotion that music is able to give people. I wish magic could do the same thing uh, consistently. I wish you could watch a magic trick 100 times and still get the chills the 100th time seeing it. Do you know what I mean? I wish that I could take a magic trick and make a music video to it. You know what I mean? Or does that make any sense?
A little
It's
bit.
not so much that I want to be a musician. It's just like the things that music
What
has. I wish
music
magic
does.
had as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't, and it's tough to. But what you can do with magic, the things that you can do is you can definitely create emotions and create hills and peaks and valleys in a show. And Copperfield is the perfect example of that. And his use of music, particularly, is really like just amazing. But if you any of his shows that you've ever been to, it's a full cornucopia of different emotions. You know,
Yeah, it's rich.
yeah, I mean it's always funny, it's sexy, it's fast paced, it's it's got the whole thing, and that's what I wanted.
And I love also what you were saying about the magic and music, and that's very interesting to me, just because there's so much about, I said it at the beginning when I introduced you. I don't know if that part will end up being in the episode, but I called you a magic rock star, and it was very funny that sort of near the end when wrapping up, you're talking about how you always wish that you were doing music,
Yeah, I
and I
wish I'd be
know.
a rock star, I guess. Yeah,
Totally,
that's
but
funny.
even just in the perspective of a rock star, like, it's this ability to like provide this like emotion every night, like over and over again. And the part that you said that really resonated with me is that it's the same the second time and the third time, right, and the fifth time, which magic doesn't have, and that's very
Yeah.
cool. And it's very, one of the unfortunate things about magic is it's like, yeah, you could see it again, like
Right.
right, but like if you know how it what if you know what's going to end up happening, like it's just an entirely different set of feelings that you're going to go
Yeah,
through
it gives you a completely different
versus.
feeling. Unless you're a magician, magicians are the only one who can watch the trick 100 times and still be like, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
great." you
This
know?
is so amazing.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of wrap up questions near the end that we ask every
Shoot,
guest. So
fast-paced ones.
no, not necessarily fast paced,
Oh,
just
okay. I thought we were
same as.
going like lightning round.
I mean, you can answer as quick or as slowly as you want. So the first is something related to the current times in magic. So what's something going on in the world of magic like that you like, and something in the world of magic that you don't like?
I don't know. There's nothing that I really don't like. I can say that. I mean, I think uh, what I do like is when things are new and kind of are, even if they're rubbing me the wrong way. It's nice just to be provoked in a different manner. Like I like that. So like even if something is, I'm kind of like, I don't really. Just the fact that it's getting some sort of emotion out of me, it feels like there's some change happening. So that's always great. Um, I don't like if you put it. I hate people who are putting CDs and DVDs still with their packaging. As far as it bothers me to no end. Luckily, it's really gone down.
Yeah.
But that's one. I mean, that's just so random. I don't even know why I brought that up.
No, but you know what? I actually love that part. Part of the reason why I asked the question is because, like, in the modern years, in the last 10, 15 years or whatever, like, so much of how we learn and share and teach and expose ourselves to magic changes, right? So that's
Right.
like, a real it's a real thing. Like, stop printing
Yeah.
DVDs. Like,
And just another sort. No, it's true. But the another in that same vein, another thing that I really don't like in regards to magic products is when people do like an interview to explain for the explanation of the effect. Man, that drives me up the wall. I got to tell you, it's like, damn, it's like just show me how the thing
how does it
works.
work? Just tell me how it works.
Yeah, just like it's like 20-minute interview about this, that, and the
The
other thing, and they're kind of
origin.
like likely to, which I'm interested in, but let's put that after. Like, let's all
First,
get
show
on
me
the
how it
same
works.
page
Yeah.
first. Yeah,
Yeah.
let's. I just want to be on the
Yeah.
same page as the people in this interview, so I know what you're talking about instead of like this weird thing. Anyway, sorry.
That's very funny, and it,
Uh,
it tickles me that the things that you don't like about magic are about, like, the production of magic within the industry. That's very fun to me
yeah.
because it just shows me that you still like swimming in the same pool.
Oh, I'm still a
Like,
kid who goes. I'm
yeah.
still the same kid who works at the magic store.
Totally.
100%.
That's
I'm
one of the
still
big
that same
things
kid.
that's come from this interview is, like, one of the things that I'm always thinking about is, when you make it, do you stop feeling the way that I feel before and after every show, right? Like, do you come up with
Right.
magic differently? Like, is the world different? And it turns out, no.
No,
It turns out it's
not
all
at
the
all.
same always, at every stage, which is awesome. And it's good to know that it's just this, but more and better and more fun.
But
Um,
actually, going back now that I thought about your question a little bit harder, and so instead of just like kind of silly, things about magic props and stuff like that,
yeah.
uh, if I were to define what this period that we're in right now is, and there's like you don't really know sometimes until it's over, but in the last, I'd say 3 to 5 years, what this there's no name for this magic period, but this is really the Instagram period. I feel like if you're going to really define the last 5 years, that's what's really like changed, is this idea of not just social media because that's been around, but like specifically Instagram, uh, and that the effect that that's had on magic over the last 3 to 5 years has really been interesting to me. Uh, I mean, I think it can be great and it can be terrible, and I think there's both sides of it. I've seen some really amazing things on Instagram, and I've also seen people's careers really blow up because of Instagram. But then you also see those things that pop up. You're like, oh, why would this person do that? Or what is this? Or sometimes it's just so transparent, when what they're trying to do or what they're trying to achieve, and that can be a little off-putting. But either way, like I said at the beginning, it doesn't necessarily bother me. It's just it's interesting, it's thought-provoking what's going on and how people take a new medium and really sort of max it out.
Totally. And I think, with that, with this being like an Instagram time, we're in this transition phase where, and I'm always talking about this right now, where it's like, we're just starting to have magicians on Instagram and magicians on YouTube and, like, all this different stuff, which means slowly over the course of the next 5 to 10 to 15 years, the cream will rise to the top. You know what I mean? Like, the best will be clear, and we'll see less of this off-putting stuff because there will be enough of the amazing stuff, that to go around. And it's the same with every industry. Like, now, average magicians don't get shows in Vegas. Like, and different things to that end. So I think we're in a phase where maybe people that should be there and people that shouldn't be there are all crowded all together, bumping up against each other. And I think over time will that will start to separate, and it'll be less annoying because the people that suck are going to sink down quicker. I think, but who knows?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to see what the next step is for the Instagram magicians because there will be a next step. I just don't know what it is.
yeah. The next thing that I wanted to ask about is the endless loop. So, in order to keep this podcast going on for eternity, each
Hmm.
guest is asked to recommend another guest who we absolutely have to have on. So, who do you think would be a fantastic guest to be on this podcast?
Okay. Okay. Let me think about this. There's a lot. There's a lot.
To be honest, that you named in your that have been on your team and stuff have not been on the podcast yet. So,
Well,
even that's
okay.
a great.
Those
Yeah,
were pretty much the names that are
yeah,
what I was going to say. So definitely B. Smith.
yeah. Perfect.
I think he's a great mind. But also all of the guys who I work with with Copperfield, Blake. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
talked to him.
We
Uh,
have not spoken to Blake, but we spoke to Patrick Kuhn, and we have not spoken to Kayla Morelli either.
but also Jonathan Bain. I
Yeah,
think actually that's actually
yeah,
a really good guy to talk to, specifically because he can bring something different than anybody else might. Because uh, in that same vein, that there's been a few interviews that I've done with magicians who they're very interested in like hearing the idea of what's it like behind the scenes versus in front of the scenes. Like that sort of thing. It's an interesting mix. He's that same sort of thing. What's the difference between being a performer but then also being somebody who turned that performance, the love of performing magic, into a company. But then the fact that he also does work on behind the scenes with a lot of actual routines to this day, and he helps me a lot. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So it's
And it's
and then
funny.
the playing cards and other thing.
It feels like you did the exact opposite. You know, you started working on teams and everybody's teams and teams, and eventually you formed your own team and started putting on your own
Yeah,
show, which is crazy.
right. But yeah, no, I would the JB. I think that's a
Perfect.
really interesting
Perfect.
interview for
Yeah,
sure.
that's amazing. The next part is sort of the favorite part of the episode. So we've been talking for over an hour now, and people listen to the podcast doing a whole bunch of different stuff. Driving their car and riding their bike or whatever they do. And I wanted to distill maybe one thing from the episode that we thought is particularly important, and each of us, will take a moment to reflect on maybe one moment during the podcast. So for me, I know one of the most important things that you said that really excited me was talking about giving when you're meeting all of these magicians, and not just giving in the sense of being like, hey, I hope you like me, and but just giving because you're passionate, because they're passionate and passionate about magic, and and you see an idea that you can share, you share it, and that's what helps people build connections and build great friendships, but also like that's what helps magic grow.
Absolutely.
And for you, what's a highlight or a favorite part for you?
The one thing that I think is really important if you're going to put together a show, or if my words could have influence you or help you out at all, is just, and it's so simple, it's just the idea of peaks and valleys in your act. Like really push that hard, because you need to get emotions, and if you can hit as many emotions as you can, you'll be better off, and people will enjoy the show more. And I mean, I know it seems kind of silly to say, but it's like, no, think about how not to make every single trick the same trick.
I disagree. I mean, I agree about that, but I disagree about it sounding silly. I think that it's something that people countlessly fall into because we try to define ourselves, right? We try to say I'm a mentalist, or I do this, or I do that kind of magic. I do card magic, and then you end up having just tricks that are all you predicting the outcome of something over and over and over again, right? Or
Right.
whatever it ends up being. So I think
And
that
that's the thing. You can do that as a mentalist. It's
mhm,
harder for sure, but you can
yeah,
absolutely do that if you just stick to mentalism. There's so many different types of mentalism routines that you can really get people going in a different direction, in a different headspace,
totally.
than just the prediction or just psychometry or something.
Mhm. And there's different ways to showcase, to showcase what you're doing, different skills, different ideas, different emotions, different. So I really love that. The last thing,
Darren Brown's the best example of that.
oh
What
my
you can do with
gosh,
mentalism
yeah,
to give, and that's like there's a lot of things that Darren does amazing, but it's just the persona and the air of the show itself that is one of the strength. It's just the like the different dynamics that are happening in each different routine.
totally.
Is
He's defined so much of mentalism and so much of the direction
Yeah,
where it's all gone. Um, uh,
absolutely.
and the last thing is plugs. So where can people go to, follow you along the journey, to get tickets to the show, and to buy any effects or tricks that you've created over the past 2 decades?
Yeah, so primarily, if you'd love to see the show, it's nomadupstairs.com. Um, if you happen to get tickets, please let me know on Instagram or Twitter. It's Dan White Magic. If you come to the show, please say hi. I talk to everybody after the show, and more than willing to talk to you as long as you want. So if anybody who watches this comes to the show, please say hi. And as far as products go, I mean, there's different things I've had in the market, but the most recent thing we just re-released Lit, so which is a fantastic trick. And I don't mind saying it that way because it really is. I do it all the time, and I've been doing it for many, many years. But that's on Theory 11 now, so it hasn't been available for a few years, so it's good that it's back.
Beautiful. And do you have any secret advice for somebody who is trying to get tickets for your show but just can't? Any inside scoop?
Unfortunately, there's no real trick to it. It's stay on it. Um, at the moment that it's released, but also I would, if you're in town, here's a trick. If we do release tickets every once in a while to the show, that might be happening that night, because people do cancel. Weather happens, this, that, and the other thing happens. Sometimes we have to change our seating arrangement. So they do pop up on the day of sometimes. So if you're in town, check it out the morning of if you want to go that night.
Well, there you go. And Dan, thank you so much. What an excellent interview and good fun. I had a blast, and thank you for coming and joining us on an episode of the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And once again, a big, huge thank you to everybody at home who joined us for another episode. Thank you for being here, and we will see you all next Thursday. Well, there you go, episode 152. I hope that you liked it, and I hope that you learned something. Take a moment, see if you can digest some of the information, and if there's something that you can put into practice, do it right now. That's the whole point of learning. That's the whole reason why you're here. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the podcast, and I will see you next Thursday.